Imagine this. You're standing underground in complete darkness. Your lantern flickers across the cavern walls and suddenly, they're glittering. Not with moisture, not with quartz, with pure gold. Gold crystals so refined by nature that they don't even need processing. You scrape $40,000 off the walls in your first week. Your single railroad car of ore breaks the world record at $1 million. This isn't fantasy. This actually happened in a forgotten Colorado mining town called Elkton in 1915. But here's the question that will drive our story today. How did a blacksmith with absolutely no mining experience stumble upon the second greatest gold discovery in human history? Welcome to Southwest Desert, where adventure meets the arid beauty of the American Southwest. Join us as we explore the rugged landscapes, uncover hidden historical gems, and dive deep into the lost gold legends and gold mining history of this iconic region. Please leave a like or comment. This is very helpful. Let's journey together into the heart of the Southwest Desert. Welcome to the story of Elkton, where the rules of geology were rewritten, where boxing champions dug alongside future presidents' advisors, and where a cave lined with gold crystals changed everything. To understand Elkton's golden miracle, we need to travel back to 1893, when Colorado faced financial annihilation. President Grover Cleveland eliminated the Sherman Silver Purchase Act, and Colorado, the Silver State, watched its entire economy collapse overnight. Mines shuttered, towns emptied, fortunes evaporated. But fate intervened. Almost immediately, prospectors discovered gold inside the cone of an extinct volcano near Cripple Creek. This would become the second largest gold-producing district the world has ever known, surpassed only by South Africa's legendary Witwatersrand. The Cripple Creek district would produce hundreds of millions in gold, spawning dozens of mining towns along the volcanic slopes. And among these settlements, none had a story quite like Elkton. Enter William Shemwell, a blacksmith from Colorado Springs who had probably never held a mining pick. In Cripple Creek, this didn't matter. The gold formations defied every established principle of geology and mining science. Experienced miners were baffled. Their textbooks were worthless. The gold appeared where it shouldn't, following no logical pattern. This created a wild democracy of prospecting. Two pharmacists literally threw a hat in the air, filed a claim where it landed, and discovered the pharmacist mine, which sold for $500,000. People dug with garden hose and pitchforks. Experience meant nothing. Luck was everything. Shemwell hiked up Raven Hill near Arequa Gulch and started digging. He found some gold, modest amounts, nothing spectacular. He took on partners, including an African-American man who contributed a mule for his share. When registering the claim, Shemwell needed a name. He remembered seeing bleached elk antlers near his excavation. Good enough. The Elkton mine was born. What Shemwell couldn't possibly know was that he'd just claimed a $50 million fortune, the district's second most productive mine. But he wouldn't be the one to see it through. Here's where the story gets beautifully absurd. Shemwell had been grub-staked by two Colorado Springs grocers named Sam and George Bernard. In exchange, they received half interest in whatever Shemwell found. When the Elkton started producing serious gold, the Bernard abandoned their grocery store, bought out Shemwell completely, and took over the mine. They brought in Ed de Laverne, a legendary mining engineer who'd suggested renaming the first camp Cripple Creek when the post office rejected Fremont. Under professional management, the Elkton's shaft yielded over $16 million before production declined in 1916. Total estimates range between $45 and $50 million in gold. A town sprouted on the steep hillside above the mine. By 1900, 200 people called Elkton home. By 1904, that number exploded to 2,500. At its peak in 1905, 3,000 souls clung to that rocky mountainside at nearly 10,000 feet elevation. The town never had an official survey. It just grew organically, chaotically, around the golden heartbeat of the mine. And the characters who passed through. Bernard Baruch, future advisor to presidents, won a brutal bare-knuckle boxing match in nearby mines. Tom Mix worked as a cowboy before becoming a Hollywood legend. Groucho Marx drove a grocery wagon. Future Governor Ralph Carr grew up here. The Dempsey brothers worked as muckers until Jack died in a mining accident. His brother Bill took his name and became world heavyweight champion. This was Elkton's golden age, quite literally. But the most spectacular discovery was yet to come. About a mile uphill from Elkton sat another mine called the Cresson, owned by Chicago businessmen J.R. and Eugene Harbeck. In 1915, they hired mining engineer Richard Roelofs to survey the property. What Roelofs found nearly stopped his heart. He was so shocked that he refused to proceed alone. He demanded witnesses, insisted that company attorney Hildreth Frost and Ed de la Vergne accompany him underground. Roelofs led them into an underground chamber roughly 20 to 40 feet high and 15 to 30 feet across. And the walls? They were lined with gold crystals, not gold ore needing processing. Pure gold crystals refined by geological forces to such extraordinary purity that they could be shipped directly to market. During the first week, workers scraped $40,000 in gold off the walls. To prevent theft, called high grading, the mine installed vault doors at the entrance. Miners changed clothes after every shift. Armed guards rode shotgun on every ore shipment. The Cresson produced one railroad car worth $1 million, a world record. Before they finished, they dug down 2,400 feet and extracted $49 million in gold. Dick Roelofs built an aerial tramway spanning a mile from the Cresson to Elkton's railroad station. In 1914, Albert Carlton bought the entire operation for $4 million. The Cresson Cave remains one of the most spectacular gold discoveries in American history. But paradise never lasts. In 1904, labor wars consumed the district. The Western Federation of Miners deployed a professional assassin named Harry Orchard. He dynamited the Vindicator mine, killing 2 supervisors. He bombed the Independence Railroad station, killing non-union workers arriving on the evening train. The governor called in the state militia. Temporary military camps were established at Union strongholds, including Elkton. Eventually, the Union was crushed. Members were herded out at gunpoint. The mines reopened. Elkton enjoyed remarkable infrastructure for such a remote mountain town. 3 separate railroads built through the community. There was a station house, a telegraph office, everything a booming town needed. But the boom couldn't last forever. The decline was gradual. People drifted away. Some moved to nearby Victor. Families occasionally move into the old houses, but most stand empty now, their weathered wood baking under the Colorado sun. Of 12 original towns in the Cripple Creek district, only 3 remain inhabited with tiny populations. Today, State Highway 67 winds around Raven Hill between Cripple Creek and Victor. A dirt road branches upward to Elkton's sun-bleached buildings. In summer, cattle graze where miners once walked, supervised by an ill-tempered bull. There are no fences. The mine buildings are gone. The railroad tracks have been pulled up. But the view northwest on a clear day is still spectacular. And somewhere deep beneath your feet, if you stand in Elkton, lies that cave, those walls lined with crystalline gold, refined by nature herself over millions of years, a fortune that once seemed infinite, a treasure that sparked a rush, a discovery that defied every rule. What would make a town produce 40% of an entire state's gold and silver in a single year, only to vanish into silence just decades later? Welcome to the remarkable story of Mogollon, New Mexico, a mountain town that clawed $1.5 million in precious metal from the earth in 1913, survived devastating fires and floods that would have destroyed lesser communities, yet ultimately couldn't escape the inevitable fate of America's great gold camps. This is the tale of fortune seekers, violent robberies, natural disasters, and the glittering promise of gold that built an empire in a remote canyon, only to watch it crumble into dust. The story begins not with prospectors or fortune hunters, but with an army sergeant stationed at the edge of civilization. In 1870, James Cooney walked the precipitous slopes of western New Mexico's mountain ranges while serving at Fort Bayard. What he discovered there would change his life and end it. Silver veins, rich and promising, cut through the rock faces of what would later bear the name of an 18th-century Spanish governor, the Mogollon Mountains. But Cooney was a patient man. He completed his military service, spending 8 long years watching those mountains from afar, knowing what treasures they held. In 1878, when his hitch finally ended, Cooney returned to claim his fortune. The silver he'd found years earlier was accompanied by something even more valuable, gold in quantities that would soon attract hundreds of desperate, determined men to this isolated canyon. The gold that Cooney sought, however, came with a terrible price. Victorio and his Apache warriors still controlled much of this territory, and they didn't surrender their mountain homeland without a fight. James Cooney's life ended at Apache hands, his blood mingling with the gold-bearing ore he'd spent years planning to extract. But his brother, Captain Michael Cooney, refused to let the dream die. Traveling from New Orleans, Michael took up where James left off, developing the original claims and searching the canyons for new strikes. By 1889, Silver Creek Canyon had yielded its secrets. The Maud S. and Deep Down mines proved to be bonanzas, that magical word that made men abandon everything they knew to chase mountain gold. John Eberle, who discovered the Last Chance vein, hammered together the first log cabin in what would become Mogollon. Harry Herman, nicknamed Uncle Harry, built a sawmill to feed the town's explosive growth, donating timber for the community's first jail, a structure he'd ironically find himself locked in during his periodic drinking bouts, swearing each time that he'd burn the place down when released. The town grew with remarkable speed. A post office opened in 1890, giving the settlement official recognition. Schools appeared by 1892, signaling that this wasn't just another rough mining camp destined to disappear. Families were putting down roots in gold country. But the gold itself proved both blessing and curse. The Little Fanny, Champion, McKinley, Pacific, and Deadwood mines joined the original producers, their shafts driving deeper into the mountain, their stamp mills crushing ore day and night. The sound of gold being separated from worthless rock echoed through the canyon, a mechanical symphony that promised wealth beyond imagination. The year 1913 stands as Mogollon's crowning achievement, a moment frozen in time when everything seemed possible. The mines that year extracted approximately $1.5 million in gold and silver from the reluctant earth. To put that staggering figure in perspective, Mogollon alone produced roughly 40% of New Mexico's entire precious metal output. 40%. A single remote town, tucked away in a narrow mountain defile, outproduced nearly half the state. By 1915, 1,500 souls called Mogollon home. The town boasted electricity, running water, and telephone lines, modern luxuries that seemed almost magical in such an isolated location. 300 children attended school, suggesting a stable community rather than the transient bachelor camps that characterized many gold rushes. 3 physicians staffed the hospital, ready to treat the inevitable mining accidents that came with digging for gold in unstable mountain rock. The Silver City and Mogollon stage line ran daily, covering 80 grueling miles in 14.5 hours, hauling not just passengers and freight, but something far more valuable: gold and silver bullion fresh from the smelters. Those shipments, worth thousands of dollars each, made the stage line an irresistible target. Just before Christmas 1912, law enforcement got word of a plot to rob a $5,000 mine payroll. Captain Fred Fornoff, Sheriffs McCart and Blair, and 2 deputies hatched a counterplot, positioning themselves along the road 2 days early, ready to ambush the ambushers. But the stage rolled past their position without incident, only to be robbed a few miles farther on. When the officers split up to investigate, they made a shocking discovery. The deputy leading the Mogollon posse had been in on the heist all along. The gold's temptation had corrupted even those sworn to protect it. The violence escalated. Late one afternoon, 2 Mexican bandits armed with Winchester rifles walked unnoticed into the Mogollon Mercantile Company, where a $3,000 payroll sat waiting. When manager C.A. Freeman turned to ask what they wanted, both men fired simultaneously. Freeman and clerk William Clark fell dead. Bookkeeper R.E. Burns was forced to open the safe and hand over the gold-backed currency before the killers mounted up and fled toward the eastern mountains. The posse that hunted them down killed 1 bandit in a firefight and captured the other. Swift frontier justice for those who'd murder for gold. Yet all the gold in Mogollon's mountains couldn't protect the town from nature's fury. The first major fire in 1894 wiped out most of the wooden structures. Ambitious citizens rebuilt immediately, this time using stone and adobe. But fires returned in 1904, 1910, 1915, and 1942, each one claiming lives and destroying the wealth that gold had built. Floods proved equally devastating. Each spring, melting snow and heavy rain sent torrents of water sweeping down the mountain slopes and through the narrow canyon. The floods of 1894, 1896, 1899, and 1914 washed away tailings dumps filled with processed ore, destroyed bridges, swept houses downstream, and drowned residents. The town sat in nature's crosshairs, yet the gold kept people rebuilding, kept them believing that the next big strike would make all the suffering worthwhile. World War I marked the beginning of the end. When the nation needed steel, copper, and strategic metals for the war effort, gold suddenly became less important. Demand dropped, prices stagnated, and mines throughout Mogollon shut down. By 1930, only 200 residents remained from the peak population of 1,500. The town seemed finished. Then came an unexpected reprieve. In 1934, the federal government raised gold's price to $35, a stunning 69% increase. The stimulus was immediate and dramatic. Mines that had been silent for years roared back to life. By 1938, the population had zoomed to 1,000 residents. The Midway Theater showed films again. Fert King made ice. Pridemore and Howe's auto line ferried passengers through the mountains. Gold had saved Mogollon. But the salvation proved temporary. World War II brought another crash in precious metal demand. The government needed its resources focused on winning the war, not extracting gold from remote mountain mines. Then came the devastating fire of 1942, striking the town while it was already economically weakened. The combination almost finished Mogollon entirely. By 1950, only the Little Fanny mine remained in operation, a solitary holdout against the inevitable. Today, even the Little Fanny stands shrouded in silence. The stamp mills no longer crush ore. No miners descend into the shafts. The mountains still hold gold, geology doesn't change, but the economics of extraction, the global demand, and the march of history have moved on. The post office closed in 1973, ending 83 years of official recognition. 24 stone and wooden buildings remain, lining the once bustling main street. The J.P. Holland General Store now houses an art gallery. The Silver Queen Museum occupies the old Coates and Moore building. St. Francis Catholic Church still stands at the intersection where Jack Canyon meets Silver Creek. A narrow dirt road winds past rusty machinery and abandoned mine buildings to the Little Fanny's extensive tailings dump, a fan-shaped monument to the millions of tons of rock that were crushed in the search for gold. So what would make a town produce 40% of a state's gold, only to vanish? The answer lies in gold itself, simultaneously the most desirable and most treacherous foundation for a community. Gold built Mogollon with remarkable speed, attracting 1,500 people to a remote canyon, creating schools, hospitals, theaters, and all the infrastructure of civilization. That same gold sustained the town through fires that would have destroyed lesser communities and floods that swept away everything not built on bedrock. But gold is a commodity, not a guarantee. Its value fluctuates with government policy, global conflict, and economic priorities beyond any single town's control. When World War I made gold less strategically important than steel and copper, Mogollon had nothing to fall back on. The surrounding mountains held no timber industry, no agriculture, no alternative economy. The town existed solely to extract gold and silver, and when that purpose ended, so did Mogollon. The ruins that remain tell a story repeated across the American West, of boom towns that rose on mineral wealth and fell when the economics shifted. Mogollon's 40% of New Mexico's gold production in 1913 wasn't a sign of permanence but rather a peak before an inevitable decline. The ghost town now serves as a reminder that communities built on single commodities, no matter how precious, rest on foundations as unstable as the mountain slopes that surrounded them. The gold is still there, locked in the Mogollon Mountains' veins of quartz and ore, but the people are gone, and the machinery is silent. In the end, Mogollon discovered what every gold camp eventually learns, that the glittering promise of precious metal can build a town in a decade but can't sustain it for a century. The mountains keep their gold now, and Mogollon keeps its memories, frozen in stone and wood along a quiet canyon where 1,500 voices once echoed with dreams of fortune. What would you do if you discovered that the ground beneath your feet, the very street you walked on, the floor of your house, was filled with gold? Not metaphorical gold, not fool's gold. Real, glittering, life-changing gold worth hundreds of dollars per day when most men earned pennies. This isn't a hypothetical question. It actually happened in a small California town in 1848, and the answer to that question transformed a muddy mining camp into the most notorious, prosperous, and wildly unpredictable town in the American West. Today, we're diving into the golden heart of Placerville, a place where fortunes appeared overnight, where justice came at the end of a rope, and where 3 future business titans learned the secrets that would make them millionaires. This is the story of how gold fever built an empire, one shovelful at a time. The California gold rush was barely 4 months old, but the hills were already swarming with dreamers. Along the forks of the American River, Native Americans carried an electrifying rumor, a new placer deposit yielding 6 ounces per man per day. In modern terms, that's $96 daily, over $3,000 in today's money, for a single worker with nothing but a pan and determination. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. Imagine 1,000 men simultaneously abandoning productive gold claims, scrambling over hills and through canyons, driven by nothing but whispered numbers. Within 7 days, previously profitable mining sites stood completely empty while a new camp below the South Fork exploded with humanity. They called it dry diggings, and it was about to become ground zero for California's transformation. But here's what made this place different from every other gold camp. The gold kept coming. Even when the summer heat dropped river levels and miners had to carry their ore several hundred yards to reach water, backbreaking, time-consuming labor, they still pulled 2 to 4 ounces daily. Then came the bonanzas. Random miners would strike rich pockets, and suddenly everyone crowded in, shoulder to shoulder, some taking several $100s in a single day. Picture the scene. Ragged, filthy, bearded men standing in icy mountain water, barefoot, shoveling endless loads of sand and rock into long wooden troughs called long toms. The constant noise of rushing water, the scrape of shovels against stone, the shouts when someone spotted color in their pan. These were, in the words of one observer, the happiest set of men on earth. They had every reason to be. The ground was literally vomiting wealth. By winter 1849, something shifted. Gold remained in dry diggings, but not enough. Not enough to satisfy everyone. Not enough to keep desperate men honest. That's when 5 men made a catastrophic mistake. They broke into a gambler's room, pressed a pistol to his head, and robbed him blind. The response was swift and merciless. 200 miners formed a vigilance court. The thieves received 35 lashes each. But then came the revelation that 3 of these men faced additional charges: robbery and attempted murder on the Stanislaus River. A miners' jury heard the evidence and delivered their verdict: guilty. The acting judge turned to the crowd. "What shall be done with them?" One voice rang out above the others. "Hang them!" One miner mounted a stump, pleading desperately against lynch law. Nobody listened. The 3 condemned men were placed in a wagon, driven beneath a tree on the main street, and each fitted with a noose around their neck. At the signal, the wagon lurched forward, leaving 3 bodies swinging in the Sierra wind. It was the first recorded lynching on the Mother Lode. Overnight, dry diggings earned a new name that would echo through history: Hangtown. And here's the dark irony. The name worked. Bad men walked carefully through Hangtown's streets. The threat of summary justice, backed by gold-rich miners who had everything to lose from chaos, kept the peace more effectively than any sheriff ever could. But gold doesn't just buy violence. It also purchases civilization, and Hangtown was about to discover what that meant. As the mines continued producing, the town metamorphosed. Regular stagecoaches arrived in 1851, bringing passengers to hotels that offered tablecloths and silver service, luxuries unimaginable just 3 years earlier in a tent camp. An imaginative cook, probably drunk on the town's prosperity, threw together eggs, bacon, oysters, and other ingredients into something called a Hangtown fry. The dish became so famous that San Francisco restaurants had to add it to their menus just to satisfy visiting miners. Gold didn't just change what people ate, it changed what they expected. Then families arrived, and everything shifted again. Young ladies in elaborate hoop skirts paraded through streets where 3 bodies once swung from a tree. They were, according to a popular song, dreadful shy of 49ers, turned their noses up at miners. When a temperance league and Methodist church appeared, Hangtown's lawless days were officially over. But the gold remained. In fact, prospectors discovered gold in the neighboring creek, and suddenly men were working long toms on every approach to town. Then someone struck pay dirt in the center of town itself, and chaos erupted. Miners descended with picks and shovels, tearing up Main Street, digging holes inside houses, throwing mud and stones and water in all directions. One visitor described continual noise and clatter as the entire town literally excavated itself searching for wealth. This is when the town decided its morbid nickname had to go. With gold discovered everywhere and miners standing barefoot in icy streams throughout the surrounding hills, The place was defined by its placer operations, not its hanging tree. In 1850, the California legislature granted a new name, Placerville. The town's placers began fading by the mid-1850s, but gold has a way of opening other doors. Placerville became the roaring terminus of the Overland Trail, the destination for thousands of covered wagons carrying fortune seekers from Missouri. These travelers had crossed 2,300 miles of American desert and climbed over the lofty Sierra Nevada. When one wagon train drew near and heard a rooster crow, that simple, forgotten sound of civilization, the entire convoy halted and the men erupted in celebration. They had reached the gateway to California's gold. What they found was hardly impressive. One long, straggling street of clapboard houses and log cabins, blocked with mining excavations and knee-deep mud puddles. The only pavement consisted of discarded boots, empty oyster tins, broken picks and ham bones. 6-horse stages, bearded miners, and plodding mule teams all fought for space in this narrow, chaotic thoroughfare. But the general stores, those were something special. These establishments served as saloon, grocery, hardware shop, and social hall combined. Behind a counter that doubled as a bar, you'd find whiskey bottles stacked beside canned fish, pickles, and gunpowder. 1 ounce of gold dust, $16, bought a pound of powder, a chicken, or a bottle of champagne. Storekeepers sat at rough tables playing cards with miners for the drinks, and customers with good credit could spend entire snowy days in these retreats. One surviving daybook page tells the story perfectly. Mr. Boyer's tab included 2 drinks, tobacco, more drinks, a pie, 5 more drinks, another pie, and drinks. Total, $6.25. As the article notes, there's no record of one final necessity, a stretcher. But here's where Placerville's story becomes genuinely extraordinary. 3 men arrived in this muddy, gold-obsessed town and learned lessons that would reshape American industry. Mark Hopkins opened a grocery store in 1849. The profits from selling supplies to miners taught him about capital, logistics, and the power of controlling infrastructure. He became one of the Big 4 railroad builders, the first to span the Sierra Nevada with tracks. Philip D. Armour worked as a butcher, recognizing that miners needed to eat and would pay premium prices for fresh meat. Those lessons about supply chains and consumer demand launched him toward building a meatpacking empire. John M. Studebaker made wheelbarrows for miners, saving $4,000 in the process. He took that seed money to South Bend, Indiana, and started a wagon-building business. Gold didn't just make these men rich, it taught them how wealth actually worked. In 1859, everything reversed. The fabulous Comstock lode erupted in Nevada's Washoe country, and suddenly the human tide that had flowed into California turned around and stampeded back over the Sierra. Placerville became the main outfitting point for silver-crazed miners, and the town nearly exploded from the pressure. Hills above town piled high with merchandise boxes, while owners offered fantastic freight fees to anyone who could haul goods over the mountain. Stagecoaches and mule trains were booked days in advance. The streets thronged with noisy crowds of expectant millionaires recharged by dreams of another bonanza. Placerville even aspired to become a railroad center, but the track stopped at Shingle Springs, a few miles short. The rival Central Pacific Line pushed successfully over the Sierra, and after 1867, Placerville lost its traffic to the railroads. The golden era, literally and figuratively, was over. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more great content. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.